Right, this is going to be another episode of Thorin's Big Brains here, and my guests for this one are going to be YouM3 and hawka, who are commentators slash whatever work they can get in esports slash from the UK, and they're not called Henry G, therefore doing what they can, grinding, still grinding. Basically Tony Hawk pro skater for life, grinding all day long, baby.
That's the way it is. That's the way it is out here. Yeah. Hey, we're out here doing our best. Exactly. Like the UK scene, you know, just kind of trying to grind their way back into relevancy somehow.
Yeah, exactly. In many ways, YouM3's career has always been like Flashpoint 2, just locked in the UK, unable to leave. If you know the reference, that's fire. That is fire. Although I will say the experience of being there, not so much fire, actually, believe it or not, you know. I don't really look back fondly on that one, believe it or not, YouM3, when we were just, I mean, if people don't know, at the end of that event, we were just actually told, like, yeah, we're actually just going to lock you in your rooms now. So, yeah. And they told us like actual prison, hawka, as if this was reasonable. Like, don't worry, you can call down and once a day they'll take you outside. Like, you mean like actual prison? Like I'm going into like the fucking yard for like exercise for 1 hour. Like, well, why are you saying that? Like it's reasonable. So anyway, spoiler, I haven't quite got over that yet. That is my Vietnam in many ways, you know. Anytime I think of even Twickenham, I can't watch rugby now. I go back to that image when I'm in the camp, you know, the POW camp. So it's okay.
See, but one person's Vietnam is another person's Vienna. You know, that was still like my biggest event.
All right, sure.
And so I was like, this is crazy. You know, we're in a hotel. Oh, we're not allowed to leave. Okay, no, you know, the negatives started to pile up real quick.
No, you were just enjoying the novelty. You're like, oh my God, Anders is right there. And I could talk to him like, yeah, Anders. Oh my God, he heard me. He just heard me say Anders. Oh shit, this is insane. Oh my God.
Yeah. And then you get into the 2-hour conspiracy chat.
Exactly.
Suddenly your view changes real quick.
People don't even know, mate. Like Maui actually once on one of those post-game shows when we were in the bar, actually had a good line, I remember he said that he like just listened one time to me and Anders just going like for like 3 hours. And then he said the whole time he was just sat there like, is this what day one esports is like? Because obviously what you don't realise is, it's as if you go to the bar at the after party afterwards, like the people who just talk for a living, they really talk for a living. Like when the cameras go off, they're still just talking the whole time. Like I'll tell people a random anecdote, but I won't tell you the details. I keep it based, which is one time at an event Epicenter when we were in Russia. I can't remember what year it was. I was there with Harry and Hugo and me, and it was one of those ones where the hotel was like over the other side of, I think it was Moscow it's in, from where the venue is and the studio. And so you have to just get in like a random taxi that the hotel's arranged for you with a guy who speaks zero English because he's just a low-level taxi driver from Russia, right? And then he just gets given an address and he's just going to drive you there, right? So when we're driving there, it turns out this venue for where we were doing the tournament actually there's two that sound almost the same. One's like an actual sports stadium and not the one we're in, obviously. And then one's just like, you know, like a smaller thing that's like, unfortunately, over the other side of the city. And this guy, because he's just seen like the piece of paper, he's driven us to like essentially what looked like a football stadium. And I'm thinking when I get there, like, surely we're not in that. Like, that's massive. Like, literally looked like what the like football team of Moscow or something was playing. So we get there, and luckily this guy does check with like some like security guard outside. Like, and the guy essentially tells him in Russia, like, yeah, you're at the wrong place, mate. You need to go over the other side. And it turns out that this is all during rush hour, right? So once he starts leaving and trying to go, we just get caught in like a traffic jam for like 2 hours that's moving really slowly. And we even like missed the first game. I think they were like casting. I was going to be on the desk. And so while we're in this traffic jam, just going really slowly, right? Obviously, there's nothing else to do, right? Like we can't talk to him. He's speaking Russian. So I just start talking to Harry and just essentially giving him like the download. Like when every time he tried to come back, like, yeah, but it's sort of like this, isn't it, in politics? I'm like, Harry, you don't know, mate. Like that's all like corrupting and behind the scenes, like you get killed if you talk about that, mate. And then I've just given him all the stuff I've like heard and read about and stuff. And he's just giving me all this like naive optimism, like, yeah, but you know, it could work out like that. Like, Harry, what do you mean? They're more compromised than anyone, mate. And I remember at the end of this thing, because I was passing time, you know, idle chat. I remember at the end, he sort of got out and he did look like sort of a broken man. And he just told me something mad like a few days later, something like, I think my whole life has changed. Like, obviously that was hyperbole, but like, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, you have to realize that what company you're in, basically. He wasn't ready for that level. It's like, I actually was just on some Matrix stuff like, you think that's air you're breathing, Harry? It's like, oh, I think so. It is air. Is it? No, this is the Matrix, Harry. You've got to come with me now and take the red pill. Like, I don't think I actually wonder now, because the problem is I'd never be able to find out. He'd never tell me the truth, would he? Well, you guys are gonna have to find out for me. Was that actually like a harrowing experience, or was it actually enlightening to him? I don't know. Could have gone either way on that one.
His whole innocence.
Could have gone either. Oh, that's the worst part. I actually think that was the real effect. Yeah, exactly. He was sort of like, essentially, he was on some like Game of Thrones shit, wasn't he? Like, oh, the world is dark and full of terrors or whatever. Like, I know he'll never be able to go back to that, like, you know, Willy Wonka world he lived in. Like, hey, casting, this is kind of cool, guys. Yeah, video games, love it. Yeah, love traveling around the world. So, yeah, they'll kill you, Harry. They'll kill you. Get over here, mate. Right, anyway, speaking of people who will kill people, obviously not talking about the Evil Geniuses CSGO team, we're going to talk about some of the good roster moves that happened. Because actually, here's the thing. Even though the one level at which I hated the roster mania was just some of the really big teams that got sort of like, well, you're not going for the big name. You're just getting like an all right player. Like that was a bit of a downer. But I will say, after actually seeing some of the teams in action, some of these lineups are pretty good, actually. Like, I'll give you one. We'll start off on the backs. They've been actually like the success story of Blast so far. Mate, no one after this event can ever fucking talk shit on the talent eye of Daps from Team Liquid. This guy is a monster. Like, I'd even heard something similar about the Wind Waker guy that, like, no one knew. That, like, oh, they're not getting him to be, like, some superstar carry. He's just basically, like, a super stable player who's going to be, like, some more sort of supportive roles. Like, he knows, like, how to do his job and stuff. And again, like, this is the thing with Daps. He doesn't just go and scout like, oh, let's get Simple. Like, mate, when they got Simple in Team Liquid, people knew he was a stud. It's just he had, like, attitude problems. He goes and for real does, like, the fucking Arsene Wenger thing where it's like, yeah, this guy plays in, like, Division 2 of, like, Cambodia League. You're like, who the fuck is he? And then it turns out it's, like, some stud who scores 20 goals in the Premier League or something. This guy is fucking cracked out, mate. Obviously, the Patsy one we already knew was good, but even that's just working straight out of the gate. Like, this Team Liquid actually looks good, mate.
Yeah. I liked Team Liquid from the start, mainly because I'd, you know, done the naive, I guess I'm just happy to be there thing in Paris, and actually got to sort of speak to Yakindar. And, you know, one of the awkward things I'd bring up as a topic was that, you know, liked watching Yakindar play when he was in like 2020 during that sort of Flashpoint era. And then Patsy was kind of a spiritual successor to him in a sense, kind of an imitation on another team. And it made sense as soon as they got rid of Nitro that if Yakindar was going to take over in-game leading roles, that if he's going to be thinking about the game that much, and spoiler, by the way, he was actually, you know, thinking probably that much harder on that Liquid team with Nitro on it, because he was sort of mid-rounding, he was doing some of the calling for this team as well. And so he was probably seeing a drop in his own performance, but if he could get a sort of an identical player to fill his roles, Patsy was the guy. And I actually kind of spoke to him briefly about that, just being like, yeah, we have very similar play styles. We, you know, kind of make informed decisions on entries. And, you know, that just felt like a very, very firm fit. And I won't pretend like I knew much about Rainwaker sort of coming into this, but I'm surprised how well he's done, you know, just like you said, just like a very stable anchor player that can actually, you know, most of his thriving success on his previous teams was actually in sort of late round moments, which is kind of what you want your anchors to have.
Yeah, for sure. The weird thing with Rainwaker was, because I actually watched a couple of demos just because I was like, this is the one move where I almost know nothing about the guy, so I might as well have a look. He really played, in my opinion, very similar to like NAF. He really looked like quite a lot like NAF on his old team, where he'd be like closing rounds a lot, sometimes lurking. So I was really worried. I was thinking I wasn't sure it was going to work when he first came on. And I think it weirdly does work, because like I think NAF is still getting left in more of those positions. So I don't know we're going to see Rainwaker always be left in clutches, because you kind of have NAF. Like I don't think you need to do that when you're making him step up. But I think he's definitely adapting pretty well, considering I think he's changing his roles slightly. The other interesting thing I found, I noticed in his demos, he was body shotting so much, which I think is because he was like the last man in, so players were probably tagged. But I'm wondering, like, is that going to be a thing that's a problem going forward? It doesn't seem like it yet. I hope not. It seems okay. I do still think, though, that Yakindar's calling is really the big question on this team, because there's kind of two paths you could have gone down. It basically seemed like you could have tried to keep Elige if you wanted, but you were probably going to have to get rid of Yakindar. It doesn't seem like those two were going to work together. And that's kind of a big call to make, because Liquid have put a lot into Elige over all these years. So it is kind of a big call, because I also feel like Yakindar is the sort of player that if you were to try and bring in an IGL in the future, you'd have to make sure that fit is very good. So this is kind of a big call for the future of Liquid, actually. And I feel like, especially in these early tournaments, I could see it working pretty well with the loose sort of calling. But like, I want to see 6 months from now, basically, has their play evolved at all? Does it look like he can sort of manage overall macro situations in rounds? Because I feel like, you know, once teams start to figure out Liquid, that's when I'm wondering, okay, can he get ahead when teams are actually anti-stratting him? That's a whole different ball game that I don't know we know he's going to be ready for yet.
Just to tag on to your, this is a big decision for Liquid. That was even the conversation when this roster was announced, is that they moved away from being an NA centered roster. Yeah. So they had to have made this jump very consciously, thinking that this has to work basically. Otherwise, they've basically defaulted the top North American team to Complexity, which is kind of their, I guess, longest standing rival in the past couple of seasons.
It's also just mad that EG aren't in the conversation there at all. Like,
joke,
just incredible. But sure, we'll get onto that.
Right. The ridiculous thing as well is, like, when I saw this move, like, the actual 2 players they've signed, like I said, the Rainwaker one, I already had a theory on that. I was already like, I know Daps actually has a history of scouting people. And since he's Bulgarian, I imagine he probably hit up his boy Cirque and asked around the scene and did his due diligence. Like, I've heard he doesn't just, like, fucking pick these people out of nowhere. He goes and figures out the angle. Because he's trying to do that thing where it's like, I recruit you specifically for the thing you're going to do for our team. I'm not just, like, trying to pick the best player possible and then figure it out after the fact. The Patsy one, I think, is a slam dunk. Like, anyone who saw him play in Spirit just looked like a really good player, mate. Like, straight from as soon as he came in, everyone remembers at PGL Antwerp. He's just a good player, mate. Just a skilled rifler, really nice aim. He's fitting into this team great so far. The big thing for me was, if you tell me this, right, imagine telling me these 2 details before, like, the off-season. Imagine going, like, right, 2 details, Thorin. So, 1, we're going to give up being an NA team. Don't worry about that. We don't care about being an NA team. And 2, good news, we're signing players from CIS region. I'd be like, oh, perfect. I love this move. Right, who are we going with first? Dexter. Not Dexter? Okay, wonderful. You're going for wonderful, aren't you? No? Oh, Zorti believer. There's a Zorti believer in the house. And then, no, here's the thing, Thorin. How we say we don't need to have, like, NA anymore? Yeah, we're keeping OC. It's like, do you owe him money or something? Like, what? Like, here's the thing, like this. Now, people tell me this, which sort of makes sense if you look at the Nitro move, the Legion move. They say, technically, if you get rid of Orsi, then you'd lose even like an RMR spot or something like that, because I think you need the 3 out of the 5 to even get like an EU one, if that's even a thing. That could be something. Also, for whatever reason, to be fair, I've never seen Liquid complain about Orsi. I've never even heard behind the scenes they do. So they just seem committed to that project. I'm just not a big fan because, as everyone knows, I think like tier 1 AWPer is the biggest gap between like levels at that situation, which is why if you put him in a big semi-final, he's going to lose to Zimu and Simple and all those guys. It's just the way it is. So the funny thing is, I don't have a problem with any of the players they signed. It's what they did with the players they kept that does my head in. Like the Yakindar one as well, I'm just a bit sus on, because essentially, if people don't know the whole like second caller syndrome where they have to become IGL, it's very logical. They're not idiots. Here's what they do. Because they can choose not to call. By the way, it's the same concept as the secondary AWPer becoming the primary AWPer. You don't need secondary AWP when you're feeling it, don't you? When it's like the right site for it, it's the team that's not going to punish you. Maybe their AWPer isn't good. You're hitting your shots, so that's when you pick up the AWP. You get, like, think of even Bit used to do this in Navi. You just get like 3k on the CT side. Like, yeah, you know what? I can AWP. It's like, no, mate, that isn't AWPing. AWPing is when your team lost the pistol, didn't get any of the eco rounds, then finally you get money and you have to buy an AWP, go to your spot. If you lose it then, shit out of luck now, mate. You're playing the rest of the half poor. You're looking like a bomb because you're not even buying proper rifles, and you better hit all those shots. You better hit every single crossing shot onto a guy. You better know when to rotate off. Like, that's why secondary AWPing and AWPing is a different game. One of them, you're a tourist. The other one, you live there. It's the same thing with being an IGL. When you're the secondary IGL guy, what really happens, think about your Kindart's the most obvious example. You're playing on a different part of the map as sort of like an entry, working your angles, right? And then when you get a good lineup, or you see someone rotate, or you see a small, you make a great call, like, hey, if we come now, like, we can hit a time. That's when you can choose when to make the call. IGL is when, again, you wake up, you're calling every round, bro. You're calling a round after nothing worked. You're calling a round after you try what you think's the right read and they smash your head in when you go on the site, or you just lose every 1v1 and your team's looking at you like, right, what now? And you're like, yeah, what now? Oh, wait, it's me. I have to actually come up with this call. So the problem I have is I do think your Kindar does have like a little bit in the sort of tank in that sense, because the angle everyone overplayed it is they make it sound like he's the one who figured this all out. As far as I've heard behind the scenes, and I talked to him before he was rude to me, as far as I know, he learned under James as well. When he joined that team, he just came with the raw aggression. And then what happened is, it's not just that James a bozo who plays passive and Nikindar's a genius who plays aggressive. If anything, they like sort of married the two styles. And all you have to see is, have you seen since Nikindar left, boys? Like, James still pretty fucking good at IGLing. He seems like he's got a very good sense of like late round, what to do, how to adapt. So yeah, he's taken some of that and I can see that working. But obviously, like the angle, as you say, is it was inevitable your individual game can't be maintained. You're not going to run in against NAVI when you're in IGL and pop 15 heads in a row with an AK. Like, so if Patsy can do it, okay, maybe that can work. Because my meme I said on Twitter, it's fire though, isn't it? It's like everyone was like, oh, you Kindar's the IGL. And then I just noticed in that series against FaZe, he bottom fragged and had less frags than Karrigan. I was like, well, he's got the no fragging part nailed. He's got that fucking, now all you have to do is actually be a genius like Karrigan and call the 29th round mate. You know, the hard part. Because people, that's the other thing about the secondary callers, by the way. They all secretly believe they're the chosen one, who their level won't drop off, but they'll also be the IGL. It's like, well, fuck it, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? Like, I'm sure Caldera and Shocks, and they all thought that, you idiot. Like, everyone hoped it would be the case. It just hasn't ever been, has it? Like, has anyone... The joke is, there's only 2 players I know whose level never dropped off of the IGL. That was Nico in FaZe and Blame F in Complexity. And spoiler, I don't think they were doing, like, really hard IGLing. I imagine their shit was just like, you go there, like, yeah, oh, look at that, I'm getting 3K. It's like, yeah, I've always thought, like, how much were you IGLing? And spoiler, where are all the trophies? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a thing, guys. So it's not hate, but I think you Kindar, pretty swear. These early results are nice after the Blake, but I've got to see a lot before I really buy into this part of the project. The rest of the players look good, though. I actually like the lineup.
You know, even from that angle where you're saying, you know, he learned a lot under James, I'm pretty sure there's like a content piece he did with Blast or something a long time ago where he was saying that like when he actually got recruited by Dastan, like part of the reason was that they just needed like a brainless guy to do a thing for them, basically. And, you know,
Okay.
that was probably like one of those humbling experiences. Like, wait, you think I'm brainless? Wait,
That's fire, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I
didn't know Dastan was that based that as a coach. Yeah, you're coming, you're brainless, you all just run in when I tell you, like, all right. Yeah,
you just need a soldier.
Go, brainless, go. I mean, you Kindar.
The thing is, like, when you watch them play before when they had Yukindar, like he would just be allowed to just do his own thing. Basically, they're just you run in by yourself. If you kill somebody, cool. If you don't, we'll figure it out.
The joke was they were always 30 seconds in, either 5v4 up or 4v5 down. That was just how they used to play in VP back in the day. It really was.
Yeah. Imagine if, also Liquid, like that's not a reference you put on your CV, is
no,
it?
Exactly.
You know, that quote being there is quite funny. I will also add, though, the other thing that maybe does scare me about this team, I think you bringing this up actually made me realize this, Thorin. Like, if you had Dexter on this team, I know that Dexter is the sort of AWPer who's going to, like, pick his own spots and come up with ideas for the team. I look at this squad, I don't know who's doing that. Like, Naf, his whole thing is that he doesn't do that on purpose. He's literally said, I try not to do that so that I can just play my game. OC doesn't seem like that sort of AWPer. Maybe he gets more freedom now, I don't know. Rainwaker, this guy's just transitioning to tier 1 and is probably going to have to change his roles. He's not going to do it. Maybe Patsy, I guess. I don't really know much, but he's sort of similar to Yukindar in that he seems like just an entry guy with crazy aims. So, yeah, I also kind of don't know where the other ideas come from. I guess at least you have Daps. That's the one obvious positive. But in terms of the players on the server, it doesn't seem like he's going to get much help, which is not ideal.
And also, the actual worst thing, in my opinion, about the Blast groups is they're always... this is how you know ESL does run the schedule, guys, because magically they're like, it's all right, Blast, you can have this part here. It's like, oh, brilliant, we're the first tournament after the play break. It's like, yeah, that's actually the shittest window because it's where all the like bullshit upsets are. And like the joke is like... First of all, the finals are months from now, and then like no one ever takes these seriously. Like, put it this way, it's why the meme is that result from EG. Their only best of 3 LAN win was against Heroic, best team in the world. But the first game after the play break, like the one where everyone's just like, how do you do this again? Like, and then you've just prepped for that one opponent. Like, it's why the upsets, Blast group stage always has upsets. I don't think I've ever seen one where it was like favorite wins every game. It just never happens ever. So, as much as like, look, the first run, to me, I just look at Liquid and I'm like, wow, like the players are fitting in, like the new recruits are good. That's the main angle. I'm not really like overreacting. Like, for example, if we want to transition a bit, let's talk about the new NAVI, because this is where people have got to stop whiling. Bro, just because they lost to Heroic, people are like, it's over. It's like, that's like the fucking, like, look, even though Vitality's on paper the number 1 team in the world, if there's one team I wouldn't want to play in my second official game as a brand new team with a mixture of 5 different nationalities and like all speaking second language English with a guy who's like, God, beer, with like the fucking Finnish accent, it wouldn't be Heroic, would it? Heroic, all Danish, probably the best trade frag team, the best fucking like play off each other, mid rounds from hell on T side, all the best utility, set pieces to set up the AWP. Like, mate, this is actually like the doctor's order to get wrecked. It's like the nightmare team to play out the gate. Like, I actually think the new Navi looks all right, mate. I think they look, there's so many variables. I'm not tracking it to be good in 1 month. I'm expecting it to gradually power up, you know.
I think what the weird thing was that even Simple was kind of tweeting out that he was, not satisfied with that loss to Heroic, which is, probably the most understandable team to have lost to, considering there were no changes in that team. Every positive we had to say about them before the player break is still applicable now. So it's not like there was some drastic shift and they had to come. I think they only had like 4 days practice as well, so it didn't really make a lot of sense. So yeah, from that angle, I actually do like this Navi team. I do think the pickups that they got, JL and Imma, were probably just, they're overrated. In the same way that,
everyone has to be because of the major, yeah, of course.
100%, yeah. Yes. You're picking them based on the stock from the major, and they wanted to go international. These guys were probably cheaper than a lot of other alternatives or other players, maybe even retention of players like Perfecto and Electronic. So I like the idea. I've never really been the massive proponent of Alexi B calling. Okay. I feel like there's a lot of excuses made as to why he hasn't been able to make these rosters work in the past when other in-game leaders have done more with less.
All right. Well, all I'm going to say is, maybe just keep that energy for later in the episode. If we talk about other IGLs, just keep that energy. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So it's all good. What about you? Where are you at, hawka, on the Navi team?
Yeah, I don't mind it. The only interesting part to me is like Navi are this big org, or in theory this big org, and then they're not even like, I understand going international, but so I almost think of like the Astralis parallel, where Astralis kind of they got stuck in Denmark, they didn't get the big names, and then they just slowly fell off. I prefer Navi doing this and like going international. But these are not big signings. Like the players they sold, they almost certainly got more for than this.
Oh, for sure.
And it is one of those where, like, I do like the Imma guy. I think there was also a parallel sort of between him and Boros at the major. And Boros was, to me, clearly like the inferior of the two, where Boros's game did literally look like it was run at people and just pure mechanics. Imma looked a little more controlled, especially just because of the team he was playing on. So I like that pickup. I think it might take a bit of time to adapt. I don't really know about JL. I don't massively know what he provides, to be honest. Like he's there, I guess. But this isn't the sort of signing I want to see from Navi. Like I see the upside so much more with Imma. JL, to be honest. But I do like the Alexi pickup, especially like I imagine him and Blade could work really well together because they both seem like they like to be quite intricate at times. And I don't know if that's what this team should always be doing. But Blade is clearly the man of this team. Like he's going to make sure the team plays like he wants them to play. So I actually think on that front, I could see Alexi and Blade being a really great combination together. And the other nice thing is, obviously, I would say Alexi's fragging for an IGL has been pretty solid historically. So that helps round out the roster. And like you're saying, like whenever you have a massive shakeup like this, you need a long time before you can actually sort of figure out how this roster is going to be. This is another weird thing, though. We're seeing all these big roster moves, and then CS2 is probably just going to come. And then, depending on how much that changes things, we might get this weird position where we don't actually get to see these teams properly in CSGO, which kind of sucks.
That's true.
Yeah, but I don't know. We'll see how much CS2 changes things. Hopefully not that much.
That's also, though... Oh, go on. Yeah,
no, sorry, yeah. That's one of the weird positives I actually have for Alexi as an in-game leader. I've gotten bored of quite a few in-game leaders in the circuit, kind of recycling old strategies, using the same thing over and over. I felt like Alexi was one of the few that felt like he was really trying to, he came in with a target on his T-side rounds where, he was trying to get one particular outcome to happen in a mid-round that would just blow open the whole round. Like I felt like he was actually trying to innovate stuff. And I feel like with CS2 around the corner, smokes are changing, the maps are changing. That's where I think he can do some of his best work. I think, going into CS2, Alexi might actually be probably the best in-game leader we'll get in the opening 6 months. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to sort of hold on to that afterwards. Because I feel, I've always had the impression that he's developed as an in-game leader over time, from being kind of controlling on OG with a lot of inexperienced players to even getting these other opportunities with more experienced hands and sort of easing off the gas. I think Flames even said... I think it was on HLTV Confirmed, just sort of talking about how, the Alexi that he worked with, from his understanding, like that guy has changed. He's almost completely gone from the way that he experienced in game leading on that front. So I'd like to believe that Alexi's gone through enough of that arc where he can see progress. But this also does feel like kind of the last big opportunity Alexi will get if this doesn't work, because he's been through so many different rosters now and none of them have kept him.
Sure. I mean, the key thing for me is, like, I think actually on that line, that's an angle people didn't see about this off-season. Because if you've seen all these weird interviews that keep coming out around Blast, around Vitality, essentially, it's implied it was just Zonic and maybe the org that actually wanted to bench Dupree and put Flames in. Now, look, I will say, if you know what pro players are like, some of them are a bit two-faced, as in if they know like a player's mega beloved like Dupree, they might make it sound like, oh yeah, I didn't really want to be the one that benched him, but you have no idea what they said in that fucking like private group chat that they've got, or who said what. Sometimes it is all like daggers out and everyone put the dagger in the back, and then afterwards you just like, oh, so sorry to see you go. It's like, so, but at the same time, one point they did make, which is almost inarguably a good point, is someone like Flames is sort of a player for CS2, isn't it? It's someone where it's a young player who still has so much of his career ahead of him. In theory, you can mould him a bit at the end now in CSGO. And then, just like the Navi moves, in my opinion, you just pick people with mechanics. Like, the only one thing we know about CS2 at the moment is, in theory, some of the mechanics of the guns will be the same. So that's one thing that can carry over. If you've got aim, like, you've got a good chance to get going at the beginning of the game. The problem is, obviously, we have to play out CSGO. It's not CS2 tomorrow, is it? We've got a few tournaments yet. So, because I think the weirdest thing about the Navi one to me is just, that just looks like, first of all, like you say, I'm almost certain they actually got these players cheap. Remember, like, players on teams like Gamer Legion and Apex, there's no way the buyouts are enormous. And they're also, by the way, if you know what sort of orgs they are, they're probably going to accept a much lower salary than some of the other names out there. You might even actually, like, sort of financially benefit from, on paper, because of the major, upgrading the roster to all your fans. Like, you get a win-win if you're Navi. And then there's also the factor that, like, that just does look like you watched the major and were just like, who was popping off, and then just hired those players. Like, the team construction is the weirdest part. That's why I'm not expecting it to be good like day one. I'm going to give it a few weeks, because the thing about the Blade Alexi angle is, Blade, by the way, I can tell you from talking to him behind the scenes, it's a good quality for a coach, but it's also a really fucking intense one, which is, he doesn't give a flying fuck for real what people say about Navi or what people think about Navi. Like, he really has his own vision of Counter-Strike and how you should play and what he thinks correct plays, and he is going to do that no matter what. It's why I'm not surprised Alexi like went out of his way in that interview recently to go like, it's Blade's project and I'm, sort of happy to just be here. It's like, you better had be, mate, because it is Blade's world and you live in it. Like, you aren't walking in and going like, hey, Blade, I'm just going to sort of do my thing and sort of freelance. It's like, no, you're my field general to do what I want on the server, as it were. And if you notice, you saw it when they were at their best, but you also saw it when they're at worst. Dude, even that sort of whack Navi lineup they just had, he was still trying those really slow strats. And he was still trying that thing where you sort of play like a slow military creep forwards. Like, you go here and then we take this, and then we take this area, and then we take this part of control, and then we hold for like 10 seconds to see if they peek back, and then we take the next area. Like, that's all well and good, but all I'll say is, this is the one thing I worry about with Navi, is Apex said it the best when Vitality won the major, is he said him and Zonic had to actually learn from FaZe that when you have an international team, you've got to play a bit more tempo, you've got to play a bit faster, because you're not going to have the perfect comms. Everyone's not from the same system. You're not going to play like a starlust basically and do the same slow, like, tactical, but like, so I want to just see, will Blade like be able to like integrate his approach, because that style of play I always think is the hardest to execute. It looks godlike if you do it. It's why actually the Gambit Online team looked amazing. They used to just do that really slow style and no one could stop them. They would just get it. They would get it done every time. You couldn't adapt. They shot you in the head if you did. Like, when it's at its peak, it looks like the best Counter-Strike. That's why Astralis isn't just the trophies, guys. Like, the eye test looked like that's the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. How do you beat that? But the thing is, if you're trying to do that with all these different nationalities, people who never played together, all in second language, like, good luck. Maybe you're the first one. Maybe you'll be the pioneer that makes it work. So the funny thing about the Navi ones, this is why it's fire actually as a set of moves. It is true. They're like the craziest names. Like, if you could have just signed like unlimited budget Man City style, you could have made like the most unbelievable Navi roster of all time if it goes international. Like, you could have made it bonkers. But it's like, it's got a bunch of really interesting players, and there's so many ways it could go really wrong or really right. And I feel like it's just like, it's pure box office, this lineup. Yeah. I can't wait. Even the fact that, like, Simple is just a ridiculous human, mate, because like you say, it's like the second game and he's already like, oh, I'm so tilted right now. Like,
yeah.
Bruh, it's the second game. Like, we're playing for, what, we're just supposed to win every game. I know you can. Well, not in that game, but come on, mate. We're all just humans here. We're trying to fucking play some CS. What are you doing? He's like the guy who just tryhards way too hard and face it. And you're just like, come on, we're just having fun here, mate. Come on. We haven't got all the smokes.
It was quite funny as well, because I think it might have been Launders that was saying this like on the broadcast, but the one thing that JL was kind of known for before he joined this team was, how jovial and how much of an upbeat personality he seemed to be. But this was like you know, we cut to the player cams, and it was, you know, this was the first time we've seen JL without a smile on his face. It took going to Navi to wipe that smile straight off.
Simple's got that Magic the Gathering like aura effect. Like when you're in his aura, because you have to understand as well. It's like that thing if you're a kid and someone's naughty, it's like, oh, I'm not the one who fucking gets it. Like, that's what you feel like in Navi, innit? Like, and also, anytime Simple's in like 1v2, like, please let him win this, please let him win this. Like, because you just know, mate, that was easily the worst part about that Navi. Like, wasn't even the results, because, you know, they still make like semis and stuff of tournaments. It's the fact that the second they got eliminated, it was like, right, in what way will we hear that NPL's totally to blame for everything today? And eventually, like, even on his good days, Simple wasn't even hiding it. He'd just sort of be like, some of our players are quite inexperienced and don't. It's like, bro, everyone else was in the team already. It just has to be him. Like, you may as well just call him by name if you're going to say that. We all know who you're talking about.
I'm fairly certain as well at the ESL Pro League that NPL was at. You know, Blade was on the couch. You know, they were doing these small interviews with the coaches and players and all sorts. And he was asked, you know, what was your biggest risk that you've taken, Blade? And he turned to NPL and said, picking you. And
by the way,
like,
here's what people don't know
from the start.
Here's what people don't know, like I'm saying. That's not a joke. Like, no. The thing about Blade that's really good is he's actually not a very, like, humorous guy, by the way. He really is quite a serious guy. If he says that, he's not even being satirical at all. He's not even being, like, sarcastic and doing that and being like, I'm just ribbing you, mate. He's actually just sort of being like, he's basically like Spock from Star Trek. He's like, logically, it would be you, NPL. You were my biggest mistake, and I regret it quite a lot. Anyway, shall we go now? It's like, fucking hell, man. Bloody, he's right there. That's him. So, you know, what are you doing? He's just right there. Like, but that's also the way I will say, these players that come into Navi now, it's the same for them, though, as the Alexi B angle, right? Like, they all had a great major and they were looking awesome. I tell you what, if it goes badly in this team, your stock is going to drop off a fucking cliff and you'll be back in, like, Into the Breach or a Game of Legion, mate. You won't be going straight from Navi to FaZe Clan. You'll be going straight back home. So this is like the move where, that's the one other thing I guess I worry about is, it's one thing to be like the star on a smaller team. Dude, Navi's about as big a call-up as you can get. Like, this is pressure. This is like you have gone to, like, Man City, and it's like your job to fight your way into the lineup. Like, you better be fucking amazing, because if you're not, they're going to cycle you out. They'll get someone else instead of you. And here's the other thing. They're international now, bro. They can get literally anyone that speaks English. Like, that's the biggest target you can ever have on your back, as Dupree found out.
Yeah. I also think, like, for Navi's sake, if at any point, they've obviously put all their eggs into the Simple basket. So it is a scenario where, like, if in 6 months from now this team is struggling and Simple's saying, "Hey, I need more," you're gonna give him more, probably, because if you lose Simple, you're screwed at this point.
Here's the sickest thing, though. Part of me, it's part of what we like about Counter-Strike. Part of me will always inside be a little pleb fan, though. And part of me, I have the same sickness the HLTV.org people do. The fans I'm talking about, the forum users, which is, even if it wouldn't work, here's the problem. The second they actually said, we're going international, I was just like, wait a minute, assuming it's technically possible to make a lineup of Karrigan, Simple, and Nico. And Ziwu. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the second, because no, it's possible, Yumi, before that would just be a stupid post on forum. Like, technically, if you had the money, you could make that team. You could actually have Ziwu be like, I'll just second up for you, Simple. And then Karrigan's just like, I call the whole thing. And then Nico's like, and I lurk and kill everyone. Like, whoa, you could actually do that, mate. You could actually make it happen. Would probably be a waste of money. I've got to admit, it probably costing $2 million or something. Like. Right, what team we doing now then? You pick one, Yumi. Who we want to talk about?
I guess we can kind of transition to the players that Navi lost. You know, we talk about Cloud9.
Oh, the Cloud9 lineup, of course, yeah. Speaking of exciting lineups, mate, I don't think people get this who are like casual fans. I don't know how the IGL thing will work out, but like, if it does, it's fucking game over, isn't it? This team should be like lock for top 3. Looks bonkers.
I mean, the thing that makes the most sense to me is that, you know, while Electronic is going to come in and bring new ideas, first off, I think people massively overrate how much in-game leading experience and, you know, how much of a caller Electronic is. You know, it seemed like his heart was in the right place. He wanted to do what he was talking about. But like you were saying earlier, you know, you're kind of just field commanding what Blade tells you to do. And I don't know if he's been allowed to, or if he saved it on like...
Bro, those documents were so crazy. Like, I've never seen that. I've seen like coaches have their own document and be like, you know, guys, remember like these things. He was actually handing out like MI5 dossiers, like, and now Bond, remember to check the briefings on what to go. They were like reading off tactics and like, wait there, go to page 4. Like, that was crazy. I've never seen anyone have that assignment as IGL, mate.
But I think the big thing will be that Perfecto and Electronic are actually probably in for a massive culture shock, because the guys on Cloud9 have never been in a team as structured as Navi was, and so their callouts are probably going to feel like they're not specific enough. They're not going to have all the strategies. Electronic might try and come up with a great late round call, like, guys, I want you to smoke this, and this, and everyone's going to go like, guys, I mean, I haven't practiced that smoke before, so we need to go over all of that stuff. These guys have played a very default style for a long time.
Yes.
And now for them to get that new inspiration, even if they come in with new ideas, they might just struggle to make any sort of execute look good, because they won't have that sort of free flow, free thinking philosophies coming into sites, because they know they have to perform very specific roles. And I'm just going to tag onto a point here, because I think nafany gets the bad end of the stick on this team. He was fielding opinions and ideas from all of his players, whether that was Shearer, whether that was Axile, Hobbit, and he was trying to formulate an idea late round. If that's the kind of role that he has, and they can see that they're not progressing, they stagnated and they actually fell off massively. None of these guys came in with the idea like, hey guys, maybe we should do an execute or two, or maybe we should go for a faster round. There is an onus on everybody else on this team to have said something to nafany, put your foot down. Like, if you're star players, if you're top 1 to 5 in the HLTV World Rankings, or just seen as that to your peers in general, you have pulling power. There's nafany would listen to you, I hope. But it feels like everybody else is getting skirted scot-free, because nafany is the scapegoat. He's the guy that said he was the in-game leader, and so your calling sucks. Unlucky, you're out.
Well, to be fair, YouM3, that's the only kind of goat he'll ever be. So, scapegoat, there you go. No, here's the thing. I'll just field this for a second, hawka, then you can jump in. Like, all I want to say is this. All I'm going to say is this, YouM3, is let's have some consistency. So if it's Alexi B and he has a bunch of players that maybe don't have a good idea and he's trying to control them, it's like, whoa, bro, like, stop the toxic masculinity. Like, everyone should have a say. And like, like, fuck, you need to like ease off. Then when nafany's just like, hey boys, like, have as much ice cream as you want and stay up all night long. Yeah, we'll fucking have a good time. Then you're just like, hey, they should get the blame too. What are they doing? Because here's the problem. On the one hand, right, you're taking my boy Alexi B. He has to take Mantu, just became an AWPer, and Issa, and he's supposed to like win championships and beat like Navi, fucking Vitality. Then you have nafany, just as Axile and Shiro, who every game are just like, right, plus 20. And then he's just like, we can't get a win though. Last place again. It's like, that's my only problem. Because you said it earlier, the weirdest thing about the whole nafany thing is this. He just seems actually offended that people called him out. I don't even know that he actually ever has disputed anything anyone said. Because here's the weirdest thing. If you ever listen to what Maui actually said about him way back before it became a thing, and I can tell you as an analyst, that does become a kind of a fucked up feedback loop. Like, what happens is you make a good analysis, but then the fan of that person thinks you're hating. So they say you're just hating and ignore the analysis. And eventually it becomes a thing that you're supposed to hate that person. So then every time they do something wrong, you're sort of like, look, see, they are crap at the game. But then eventually the whole analysis just evaporates away, and it's just you hate that person and do other people like them. But his actual analysis from the very beginning last year was bang on. What he said was he just doesn't like that nafany isn't like a mastermind IGL. He is the guy where they look like they just default. He lets people like Axel and Shiro just like jiggle fucking corners trying to get like a pick, and then they just go on the site or at the end or whatever. Like, they never really did look like, after the online era, they had this like super deep strat book. They never looked like they were coming up with all counters and pace changes, like you say. They just kind of ran the same game. And look, obviously, I would imagine, to tie it in, I would imagine people like Axel and Shiro did actually co-sign it, because they certainly knew how to get their frags out of the system, but it didn't look like actually a very good sort of team approach.
Yeah, I struggle to believe that there's nobody decided that they wanted to take that next jump up into the tier 1 circuit. Like, nobody wanted to adapt their style even slightly, because they just didn't for the longest time. And I just think there has to be a distribution of ownership, considering that they all came up together. These are guys that grafted and developed under each other's systems and knows exactly how each other plays. Somebody had to have like understood that you had to mature at a certain point. They're kind of going through high school, going through the motions, and it's graduating time. You have to sit down for the exams, and nobody was ready to study. So I just simply think, like, the context of Alexi versus this, Alexi had already worked with experienced players. He'd kind of come into rosters and done some good work with them. He had tangible assets that you could say, like, I have stock as an in-game leader. I have things that I bring this certain level of value to this team. nafany's only really worked under this team, and that's all that he knows. And I think until we saw Alexi on G2, for example, if we're going to continue to make this parallel, we actually saw him, play and call a very structured looking CT setup. We saw the ways that they were trying to take mid control on Mirage, for example, or the way that they were trying to approach some T side rounds. It looked very Alexi inspired. But as the months sort of waned on, that eased up massively. You saw Nico taking more initiative in fights, doing a lot more solo moves, and that felt like probably a learning experience for him. And I feel like nafany needed learning experiences to ever get that opportunity. You probably needed someone like a Perfecto or an Electronic in earlier so that somebody can just go, this is dumb. Like, why are we doing this every single time?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is the other interesting part of this is if you came from like a sporting context and you looked at this, you'd be sitting there like, why is the coach not doing something then? Why is the coach not coming in and saying, hey, this isn't working. Let's make sure nafany can have some more calls? Because like the actual quote from nafany that I was reading, so he said, if Shiro was saying he doesn't want to play on a position, that nafany couldn't tell him, no, you have to do this. Is the vibe he was trying to put across in this interview. And he's basically like taking responsibility for that in the interview, which is a good first step, I suppose. But it's also this weird thing where that specific quote out of context, I'm kind of like, don't you want your AWPer to be like coming up with ideas and being saying, hey, I want to go do this, I want to go do that. Yes. And then if he goes for his idea and he doesn't get the pick, maybe then you call for him to come back and do what you wanted to do at first, right? But we never really saw that. So it is this weird, like, not being proactive. It's almost like in his head, he was like, okay, well, I didn't get to do this at the start of the round, so now I can't do it in the middle of the round, and we're just going to end up at the end of the round, and we don't really have an idea or protocols in place. It's this weird scenario. So I would say certainly like coaching is a big thing here, where I would say
fair. Yeah,
it doesn't sound like they have like proper flowcharts almost of like what they want to do, which is already part of a problem. I will also say, I agree. I think nowadays in CS, you need more like vocal players across the whole team. Okay. It seems like every team has that. I feel like this team like probably has that though, right? Like Shiro and Hobbit, I'm sure they seem like players that have their own ideas. Shiro definitely seems quite vocal. So yeah, it's interesting in that sense. I think it definitely works out nicely though, if we're talking about the actual Cloud9 lineup now. Like you get Perfecto in. I actually am kind of shocked that Navi let him go. This just seems like a guaranteed good player. I can't imagine Perfecto being bad. I just can't imagine it. He needs no resources and he will always be solid. And then I understand the Electronic IGLing point is an interesting one. I guess if nothing else, Electronic I think will be pretty strong as a personality. I can't imagine him getting rolled over by people coming into this team. So I think Electronic as the IGL can work. I think it might hopefully strike more of a balance. But yeah, honestly, the whole coaching angle I think is really interesting. I still wonder whether that's the next like overall step up we get in CS, because I want kind of like a coach like Blade where I can say, I understand your philosophy. I know what you're trying to do on the team. So many coaches, maybe it's because they don't talk about it as much, but I don't really see like a coach going from team to team a lot of the time. There's like a very few that I feel like can keep their philosophy and can keep their control. But yeah, that's an interesting aspect to this, I guess. Maybe you've talked me around a little bit, Yumi, on the nafany side of things. Just a little, just a tad.
I will say, from the angle of the coaches, yeah, there's just so much ambiguity, and none of these organizations, even if they work with these coaches and they don't do a good job, are willing to say this guy just wasn't it. It's like, we decided to mutually part ways, business decisions.
It actually is well, because if you think about it, sometimes they bench a player, they'll just say his performance was bad. But you're right, they'll never say the coach actually was just bad at the game. Like, even when Xtaz got fired from G2, they just make it sound like, he has to, it's like fucking that Simpsons thing. He must go back to his planet now. Like, what? Like, there's no explanation why, like, one of the biggest coaches in the world came in, then he's just gone now. Like, I guess he just loved baguettes more than the team or something. Like, you never ever get any blame. You're right. It's like they're one of them instead of a player. You're just fucking cattle if you're a player. Mm-hmm. It's true. By the way, two angles on this. One is, here's why I don't mind the Electronic IGL angle, because you can always change. I'll tell you what, if you brought listen, Hobbit, you better actually be legendary, mate, because otherwise the temptation to just bring in a caller instead of you and then just have in their natural roles Axile, Shiro, Perfecto and Electronic is like, that's like a minute ago, why was I wasting my time on that NAVI line? That is like the Russian version of my HLTV forum. Like, what if this lineup was made? You know, like, and here's the thing, unlike most super teams, they would be in their natural roles. That's the craziest part. Normally a super team doesn't work because you eventually find out you had like 3 people who play like Aeon Mirage or something. It's like, but they're not the ones that play like the different spots. Like we all play this one like ticket or something. It's like, shit, we didn't think that through, because you don't think through every map when you recruit the players, obviously. This team could actually just work, and the firepower looks actually bonkers on this. Like, if this works, this is insane.
It's actually kind of cursed, because it almost feels like Cloud9 looked 2 years into the future when they signed this roster. Like, oh, guys, we're going to sign this team, you know, up-and-comers. They look good. They're going to perform pretty poorly. They're going to get rid of interns. We're going to bring in Buster. And we're going to try and make this work for as long as humanly possible. But then somehow you're going to snag Electronic and Perfecto, you know, 16 months into the journey.
They were just, it's like the NBA teams, they were already like trading players to make the cap room to like get ready for this move. You're right, it hasn't worked out. Then the other detail is this, right? Fresh update for you guys, because this interview came out 6 hours ago. Simple did an interview where, of course, he commented on Cloud9, the team that his ex-teammates have gone to. Because, by the way, Simple's not actually malevolent, guys. He just doesn't have any filter between his brain and his mouth. He just, whatever he's thinking, I'm just saying it now. Like I imagine Simple's the guy where it'd just be like, you are fat. Just like, what the fuck? Like, oh, sorry about that. I mean, excuse me, could I get past you? You know what I mean? Fucking hell, man. He just has no filter. He's not even trying to do it. Like, in this headline is so egregious. Remember, one, the circumstances under which they've let Perfecto, who I'll just say now, hawka, at that role, you might never have another player that good ever in NAVI ever again. Like, he was so good at that role. The circumstances you've let them go is obviously awkward, and no one's going to address, right? We're just going to pretend they must just go to Cloud9 now. And we must get non-people from their country. We're not even allowed to bring that whole topic up. So there's already an awkwardness where I wouldn't address it if I were you. I'd just sort of be like, wish you well, see you in the next tournament, right? But also on top of that, there's the whole thing where actually the only 3 people in the world who think nafany was good is nafany, YouM3, and Simple. Now look, I will say, 1 out of those 3, incredibly sick. Mainly Simple, obviously, been there. Like, the joke there would be, if Simple was shit, I could have just said you, couldn't I? But whatever. Sadly, he's not that bad at the moment, right? So obviously, the banter angle is, he's actually now defended this in an interview, because he's just said this headline. This is unbelievable. He goes, for me, nafany as IGL would be better. I feel Electronic needs to be a second caller. He'd play better. And it's like, bro, he's only just left. He's gone to his new team before they've even played the game. You're just like, hey, excuse me, this thing on, the greatest player of all time. I don't think that team's going to actually work. Like, the IGLing doesn't really make sense. You know the guy you fired? Yeah, you should have kept him. And you know my mate Electronic I just played with, you know, like we were like a duo, won all the time. Yeah, it's probably not going to work out with him, Cole, actually. So anyway, good luck. I wish you well. Like, bro, like, he's got a fucking game in here. Like, yeah, like, holy moly. Like, listen, I get that he's just being honest, but man alive, like, there's, you know, you didn't sense any awkwardness when he was saying all this stuff out loud. Like, what if he reads that? Like, oh, thanks. Cheers, Sasha. Like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
I love it. I just love it. Here's the thing. There will never be another player like Simple in many ways. Not just in the game, just as an individual as well. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
What a world. What a world.
What a guy.
Thing is, though, low-key, the fanboy in you has to dream that this team works out. Imagine what it would do to CSGO if it did, mate. Oh, that would be amazing.
This Cloud9 roster is just, it's actually, like, when I heard this was what was going to happen, I'm like, there's just surely no way anybody allows this to happen. Like,
exactly.
how did no one try and snipe this as soon as they heard that Electronic and Perfecto were moving on? Mad.
I'll tell you, I've got a question for you, because here's the tough one. This is the one that will actually test your analytical skills. Everyone, all the fans, are desperate for FaZe to be over. They just want to believe that, like, it's run its course. They didn't make a player change, remember? Yeah, they're getting a coach in. Apparently, we don't know who it's going to be yet. We're still waiting for all that jazz to come out. Right, obviously, they're going to do something. By the way, I will say, unlike the Cloud9 one, that is actually the most obvious thing I would have done first before I changed the roster, because the roster was mega. I would try a different coach. Like, not even any diss on Robert. It's like, we just got to have a different look at it. You get someone in with different ideas, different approach, aid Karrigan in some ways. But the thing is, it is a big gamble to not change any players. As good as the team is, they can still do runs, they can still beat top teams. Like, obviously, in this offseason, you are a team that speaks English. You are a team, by the way, that won the Grand Slam and the Major. A lot of people would join your team. A lot of these, by the way, a lot of the people that join NAVI would take this team if you asked them to come and join and take that 5th spot. Mm-hmm. What do you think, YouM3? No roster changes in FaZe. You like it?
I'm fine with it. I think the big thing is that they probably need like a greater amount of accountability, and I think this is probably stemmed off of a Maui point where he calls them procrastinators and they don't seem to be working as hard. I was always concerned that when they won their first major, that the fire had kind of died with the FaZe roster. They weren't gonna have the same sort of intensity. They weren't gonna play the same way, and it feels like their heart's in the right place. They're still trying to go for these crazy plays, but it doesn't feel like we've seen another sort of level or an extra notch added in with the titles that they've been able to achieve. So I just, maybe the coaching would be someone I can hold them accountable to make sure that they are properly reading through the prep and they can even do their own individual prep as it is. Because I'm sure these guys are working hard behind the scenes. It just might not be placed in all the right spots. It's not always about the amount of hours you put in, but it can just be how you spend those hours. So I do wonder whether or not, because I think if you were going to change something about this FaZe roster, it probably wouldn't even be the in-game leader position, which is, I think, where people are kind of calling for Karrigan, saying like he's run his course.
Yeah, I still think the great thing about Karrigan is whenever you get into a really deep game and it starts to devolve slightly, I have so much faith in Karrigan to, in the moment in the game, find the right read and find the right call. And so often you see him like running in first and finding the gap that he's created. And I think there's so much value in that if FaZe can get into those positions more often. And yeah, I guess, I mean, the question is like, what change would you make? Like, I think Brokey AWPing wise is pretty fitting for this team, actually. His like medium range AWPing style. It's not like a traditional AWPer, sure, but it seems to work pretty well in this squad. I just, it's so hard to make a roster move here. It feels like one of those where you almost would be making a roster move for the sake of it, which sometimes there can be merit to if you just need like a mood change or something. If it's like the players are at the point where they're not really believing or they need like some sort of injection, that can maybe work. Like I remember everyone was kind of saying when Yabi joined Heroic, most
That's
people
true.
said, it's kind of a sideways move. It won't do much. And then that ended up working out. So maybe it could work out. But yeah, it's this weird position where they definitely don't need to make a move. They're definitely going to be good still. But I don't. I really have no read. I have no read on this team. It's really hard to figure out, actually.
I mean, I've kind of circled almost back to the early conversations we had before they won titles, was that, maybe Rain is the guy that gets thrown out because he's been with FaZe for what?
Forever.
7 years, I think. 7-8 years coming up now. And that's the one change of scenery that feels like the most justified, because I don't feel like you can get rid of players like Robs, like Twist, like Brokey. So
yes. No, that's the other thing. It's sort of a trick question because, spoiler, I don't think anyone knows if FaZe will be good or bad. Like, you can't know. Like, the thing about the team is, like, this is why, like, put it this way, the joke is the one move that was never on the table for me is kick Karrigan, because I actually think, here's the interesting thing, I'll sort of chop the Gordian knot here, boys. I won't actually say, spoiler, you need like an hour to unpack this, whether it is actually Karrigan's the GOAT or Glave's the GOAT, and how do we decide the GOAT? What does the GOAT mean? And what the fact? But I'll tell you one thing I can say, mate, I have never seen someone in a game where his team is doing badly, like you're talking about, do as many genius on-the-fly calls as Karrigan has just in this 5-man lineup. Like, bro, it's like I said about that one at IEM Dallas. If you get like one of those off in sort of like a year, you think, fuck, what a great call for me. Dude, this year alone, he's doing it like every tournament. Like, they have a map or an elimination game like that, and it's like Launders said it the best. On the 29th round, he just always has like a golden call.
Yeah.
He just comes up with a call, and like spoiler, I won't say how I know this, but you'll find out soon. But basically, one of the reasons why is Karrigan actually does view that as his strength. His perspective goes like this. At the beginning of the game, we're coming in with all the things we looked at from the demo and our idea how they're going to play, and everyone's playing the initial sort of like game of chess of like, well, I do this and then you do that. And then he says basically late in the game is when, like you say, it all devolves and you've tried everything in the strat book and you've sort of made all the moves. At this point, you're just trying to make like individual plays and just do good calls. And that's when the other guy is like, right, I'm out my playbook. And then Karrigan's like, right, this is my office, mate. This is where I go to work. Like, now we're going to do like, a fake here. And if you bite on it, I'm going to just literally do the big balls play where if you happen to have not bit, I'd look like a dickhead. I'd just lose like that one again. The Ents one on Ancient is the best example ever, because here's what people don't get. we're all watching with the fucking radar. We're seeing with no fog of war. We see X-ray. They don't see any of that. If you actually go into that site and they're all just there, you look like an absolute dickhead and you're out of the tournament. It's over for you. And you lose in the worst way possible. And that's actually part of the genius, because you're doing the play that's so big's balls. They're thinking, well, that's the one thing they won't try, because that'd be such an insane gamble to take. And that's when you take the gamble. Like, that one aspect, like, that still is there, boys. And that's why, in my opinion, even when they're iffy, they're just box office to watch. Who the fuck doesn't like watching a FaZe Clan game?
Yeah, and I think they've got a very structured chain of command, very well understood, just to kind of bounce off of that. It kind of reminded me of this idea, or I guess it's a reference from a show called The West Wing, where, there's this great scene in it where in this building, when the president stands, nobody sits. So as soon as Karrigan voices up in those critical moments, everybody's listening. You're not having to worry about the mental fatigue of having all these illustrious rounds called out, or all these ideas that you went over in practice a billion times already, now reiterated to you round after round after round. So
you're telling me Karrigan's the anti-nafany? Everyone listens to him, and he's actually, he's just in there with a big dick.
Exactly. Obviously, the joke is
like, anyone else?
And it's also team dependent. Obviously, it's like he's got all the players that listen. The joke is in his old FaZe Clan, he was like, "What about this?" And someone's like, "Shut up!" He's like, "Oh, well, fucking hell, my bad. You do you, mate." Fucking. Because I still think that's also why, low key, whether he is or he isn't, I sort of want Karrigan to be the GOAT, because it just makes it more egregious that his own team just cocked him in a major, just like, you know what, you don't get to call him more. And he goes like, "Give me that A, let me have that fucking shit. Tell you what, you just fucking sit on the outskirts of the map dying, and if you do anything, I'll fucking kick your ass so fast." Like, I just low key want that to be the GOAT. So it's just like, what were you doing, bruh? What was going on with you and your ego back then? But anyway, it's all good. This is, hold it in. It's not the G2 part of the discussion yet. Nico's okay now. Here's the saddest thing of all. This is how, once you've been around the scene long enough, you just get to see everything eventually. Like, it's become now so that, like, I have to be the Nico defender, for fuck's sake, because all the shitters are all just on his back so much. It's like, it's all his fault. He's the reason why. It's like, he still carries, like, hard carries, like, 1 out of 3 games I watch. Like, he just has maps that are still, like, unbelievable. By the way, there's one. Let's transition to that. Obviously, G2 made no roster moves. Dude, that's the one that's a bit shocking to me. Because, look, I don't want to make it seem like an easy paint-by-numbers one, but the rest of the roster looks fire, and the one obvious place you'd do the change is you'd bring someone in for IGL. Like, I thought there was a lot of angles too. Like, one, I could say right now, yeah, he loves Zents, but I'll tell you right now, if Snappy got the call up to come and be the IGL of G2, a lot of IGLs have told me privately, that's basically the dream job. Just only come in as IGL and get those 4 players. Like, that's like in the analogy of Formula 1. That's like you're just getting the best car. You're just joining like the best of the fucking one they constructed. Well, like, that's it, what everyone wants. So the other one would be, if you were hyped off the major, I think this is more of a gamble. It could have been the HooXi move. You could have brought him in as well. Like, there's a lot of people I think would go for that gig. So, listen, I know they spent a lot of money. That might be a factor here, but man, it's balls of steel that G2's made no move at all. They're basically just gambling they're just going to be the best again.
The weirdest part about it is that because of how Copenhagen Flames sort of dispersed after their surprise major run, HooXi was seen with, increased stock because he was a free agent. They were tired of Alexi. It did feel like he was a bit of a stopgap. It was kind of just a convenient time where, he was available. They needed an in-game leader and they didn't want to go back to any of the ones they'd used before. But yeah, I think the HooXi move would have actually made a lot of sense. It just, that's behind the scenes contracts and whether or not HooXi felt he was ready, and Mao's have buybacks and all this other stuff. There's a lot of speculation about why that even happened in the first place. But yeah, I don't know. I've always believed that HooXi did something good in terms of, developing this squad to get to where they are now, in terms of, unlocking and allowing m0NESY to do what he needs to do. Because it felt like when m0NESY first came into this roster, he'd have these great initial rounds, but it felt like he was still kind of lost in terms of reading the situations in mid rounds, especially when there was a lack of information. He wouldn't have an intuitive decision to make. But that I don't know how much you can attribute that to just HooXi, or if that's just m0NESY getting time playing in the circuit long enough. I almost don't know where they go with in-game leaders is the problem, and I think that's probably where they're stuck as well. Because aside from maybe that HooXi move, unless you're trying to poach somebody from another big team, I don't see that happening for G2. Not to mention, I think the people that were behind the scenes at G2 making those sort of bigger decisions, the Carlos Sainz, Monesi.
Yeah.
I don't know if that there's somebody actually watching the scene or listening to the feedback that players or commentators are giving in terms of fixing this roster.
I will just say as well, this is also why in some way IGL of G2 is a poison chalice. Because like I just referenced earlier, dude, people think it's just that like there was the FaZe Clan lineup. They didn't win the Boston Major. They didn't win Katowice. It sort of wound down. They fired Karrigan. They benched him first, then they fired him. People think, right, it was just a personal thing, or, at that time he lost some of his feel or confidence. It's worse than that. The one that killed me was in 2020 when one of those betting companies did that like feature with Nico, where it was overrated, underrated. And they asked him, Karrigan, because they know what they're doing at least. These guys, like they know their TMZ.com. So they go Karrigan. And because Nico is a little bit like simple, he has to say what he actually is thinking. Instead of thinking like, well, obviously my PR guy would tell me, just say Karrigan's underrated and, it didn't work out between us and I wish him well now. He goes, overrated, because it's like, bloody hell. Like, so when he said that, though, it just made me think this, though. It's like, bruh, if Karrigan isn't good enough for you as IGL, who the fuck's walking through the door? Like, who are we getting? What's the short list at this point in time? You know what I mean? Like, at that point, Nico, aren't you essentially just unleadable? You know what I mean? Like, who else is there? Like, one, Glave's not even in the scene anymore. Karrigan himself wouldn't even come back now. Like, who is there? Who's available at this point in time? I don't get it. I don't get it myself.
Yeah. I will say, I think Kassad has slightly red-pilled me on HooXi not being that good. It's mainly just that the thing is, like, you can't be that bad at fragging and then also, like, just a okay IGL. Like, you can't. You actually can't. And I don't think he's a good enough IGL to substitute for that, because look at this team. Like, how can you ask for more fragging out of your 4 players than this lineup? JKS, I still think, is so undervalued.
Oh, yes.
Like, the community doesn't talk about this guy. He's playing some shit spots and playing incredibly. I actually think that if you were to take one player out, I think Hunter is a little inconsistent for me. I don't know. He strikes me as a player who, like, he has a pretty good read on the game, like, a lot of the time, but I don't know why. It's like sometimes the micro decisions he makes, I don't know, it's almost like he's thinking too hard or something, and he seems to, like, mess up his movement or just make some weird moves sometimes. I don't really know what it is, but there's a vibe I get with Hunter that, yeah, he's not always, like, in the spots he gets, I actually think you could get a bit more output out of him. So he's one that maybe you could also look at, but I mean, the elephant in the room is, firstly, the HooXi angle. Secondly, I still think there's a real strong decision to be made about if you want Swanee coaching. You upgraded your analyst to become the coach. Yeah. By the way, I want to say, remember that veto thing that happened at the major?
Oh,
I wonder whether Swanee, sitting there as an analyst, is like, oh, well, we prepped for this map because I'm a former analyst and this is what I'm biased towards. Like, that's what he's done his whole career. I wonder if he just said, oh, well, I trust I've done the prep on this. We're going to do this. I don't know how much of a say he had there, but like that has to come into play. So I think that's also something you could look at for sure. But yeah, it's realistically, as much as like Hunter is maybe someone you could look at, I don't see enough from HooXi. I don't see the structure enough. I see silly mistakes frequently enough.
It is wild. Have you noticed the theme of this interview? Well, the talk show at the moment is somehow coaches are just skating in all these jobs. Like, you're right. No one, dude, everyone just mocks us at HooXi. No one even mentions Swanee is the coach. They pretend like there isn't a like coaching isn't a thing. Like, that's another thing. Yeah, to be fair, if you're going to have a massive superstar roster, maybe get a superstar coach. Maybe get a giant name coach who's going to come in and figure out how all these guys work. Because you are right. It is ridiculous. That, like, essentially, he did just get, like, if you know the analogy in football, he is just like the caretaker manager, but then they won like a title. So he's like, you get to stay now, which is the feel-good story. But then the problem is, if anyone knows football, if the next season's shit and you're in relegation, you're getting fired immediately. Like, that's not even on the table. You're instantly fired in it. Basically, I would flout the laws of the English Commonwealth and wring that Swanee's neck. You have to be from the UK to know that, believe it or not. Yes, there are certain areas we are a meme. Like, if you actually like attack a swan, specifically, that is the like royal family's animal for some reason, and you get like ultra fucked up by the police, basically. Which I know sounds just like some meme shit from the medieval period. It's actually real. It actually is real.
They could also be aggressive little fuckers as well. Honestly.
Oh, they can. They go hammer.
They're not courteous at all.
I walk past every day. They didn't give a fuck. I was walking home with my shopping. It comes over.
They know they're protected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though, ironically, this Swanee definitely not protected and absolutely can't get aggressive with Nico. In fact, there's the joke. They'd want to get aggressive with him, UV, because he's got all that bread on his head, hasn't he? That's a callback and a half. It's the way that my jokes themselves are outdated boomer jokes, because that was a joke from 2016. It's 2023, boys. I've got to fucking update the playbook a little bit. It's going too far now. No, I agree, though.
Just quickly,
the other thing about the G2 lineup is, when you have 4 players that good, surely some combo, this is the best team. If you make it work, you know.
Definitely. And then also, I mean, you look at the team that has been really successful lately. Vitality went big on Zonic, and hey, well, that's worked out. So maybe other orgs take note.
That's why I said, obviously I was memeing, but the real gangster move of all time, because it's weird that on the one hand, they've made Robban step down, they're playing a tournament, but where are all the leakers at? Where's everyone in Russia who tells me who all the players who are joining the team, and about 90% don't, but if one of them does, we're like, you're a genius. Where are you at? Tell me who was joining FaZe Clan. I want to know the coach now, because my ultimate meme would be that this has just been the greatest guarded secret of all time, and in walks fucking Glaive, and then he does like the fucking Arnold and Carl Weathers like power like out of like Predator, where they do that like thing like that, and then they just unite together to just destroy the fucking CS2. That's why my joke on Twitter, Yumi, was that Glaive walks in, like Karrigan goes, hey, I want to introduce you guys to someone. Glaive just walks in, right, literally carrying 4 major trophies, like Conor McGregor or something. Then he comes up and he goes, I think I was the GOAT of CSGO, but I think Karrigan is going to be the GOAT of CS2.
Oh,
cutscene, credits.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, I mean, Karrigan's even already doing the Batman shit or whatever when he walks out. Let's get Glaive in a Superman costume, man, out of nowhere from the top rope.
That'll be the shit. Also, unironically, better cast than the DC does in their movies nowadays.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I think the most cursed part about that G2 roster, by the way, is that, you know, you said HooXi's fragging, but the bad part is it's actually gotten better. Like, it used to be really bad. Like, you watch this guy play, and you think, I could put a level 10 Face-It player in here, and he would do a million times better. But now he looks serviceable, but it's still just not enough. Like, the guy's out of his depth.
He still hasn't had a positive rated tournament while he's been on G2. I've just had a look.
The problem with HooXi is this. I actually, as far as I know, despite people trying to like entrap him in crazy scandals that, as far as I can tell, he was never involved in, he actually does seem like a mega fucking like chill guy. He doesn't seem at all like an arsehole. Like, in a way, I pull for him, but here's the problem. My analogy's like this. Yeah, if this was like a fucking kids movie by Disney where, like, you know, oh, you won't believe it, I've gotten the call up to go to G2. Oh my God. And he's making it, he's winning the championship. Yeah, in that movie, it's brilliant. It ends awesome. He wins the major, and Nico's like, yeah, I'm glad I believed in you. This is real life, motherfucker. Do you know what Counter-Strike's like? Yeah, you are aware, simple as our GOAT, he's like the most toxic player of all time. Like, in real life, like, I'm sorry, bad people do sometimes succeed. Like, being a nice guy ain't enough. That you know, I need more than that. I need some stuff on the server. I'm with you. Because the other problem is this. Whenever someone says, oh, Karrigan's fragging shit, I can just go, right, look at map 3, round 29, right? Look at the end of the second map where they were going to be eliminated. Watch this. I can tell you stuff to go watch. It's like, that was him. Like, that wasn't someone else who called that. He clearly did. I don't know where those are for G2. Like, in G2, it looks like they play like a mild amount of structure and then people frag out. They have amazing players.
Yeah, that sums them up, I think.
And I will say as well, yeah, that is the part that, like, how do we never get to the bottom of that mystery? So we can never find out who made that veto at the major. We never get to know that. Because that's the thing. I think fans, this is where you can tell they don't like really look into the details. It wasn't just that they lost. It's that they almost like inted their own veto. That's the part that's so crazy, isn't it? It's like the Nico was always on. That's by the by to me. It's like, I've always been someone who's heavily about what you veto, whether it's like got comfort for you, whether you feel like you know what the opponent's going to do. The joke there is like, they were like mind controlled into vetoing what Fnatic would have wanted them to pick. Like, what? Like, what?
Yeah.
That was so weird, wasn't it?
It was also so frustrating because it's like, obviously this is not a map where like Nico historically is just going to carry you out of a game. Like, he can do that on Nuke, obviously. So we've seen it so many times. So it's like, you have to be so sure that that is the right veto. Otherwise, this happens. But anyway.
I just in general want organizations and players to hold each other more accountable, because it feels like people are allowed to kind of fail upwards with no one actually holding them to the draw saying like, oh, but you could tell you were kind of like this. You know, in traditional sports, you get sideline views. If you're at the event, you can see the coach chewing out players when they're making a mistake or they're not doing something right. A lot of that is sort of held back until after, in the privacy of, off-camera stuff or back in their hotel rooms where they're chewing them out. And there's just basically no way for people to even get like an inkling as to where the problems lie, aside from, maybe the in-game leading looked a little rough, or the strategies didn't really pan out here, or this guy wasn't shooting hard enough. Those are the data points that we have. We can't make these educated decisions or these educated reads on players, because a lot of the time it's just their personal cameras that we're looking at, just them going, oh damn it, or slamming desks or punching monitors. That's the most we get in terms of how frustrated, or whether or not they feel like they're the problem or there's some kind of lingering issue on these teams. So
here's what we do, right? To end this episode, here's what we'll do to make it fun. Because right now, between all the roster moves, we've only seen a few games at Blast. No one can really actually know what is the power dynamic in the scene, who are the best teams, who's going to drop off, etc. So obviously the big event is Cologne. It's not that many weeks away now, boys. It's going to be here before you know it. So if you think about it, right, there's 6 massive names. You've got Heroic, Vitality, FaZe, G2, the new Cloud9 lineup, NAVI. Who wins Cologne? Tell me who wins Cologne. For whatever reason, you can be biased. You can mean, who would you pick? Who are you going to say now? Because by the way, I think the crazy thing is you can make an angle for any of these teams. I think it's pretty hard. I don't think there's an obvious one to me.
Why do I want to say Cloud9? It just looks so good. There's so much firepower. Like, that's a team that could hit the ground running. Yeah, screw it. I'll say Cloud9. Why not? Let's do it.
Okay, he's going all in.
I'm a believer.
He didn't really buy into your nafany thing too much then, so fair enough. Okay.
I'm actually convinced Cloud9 are. There's going to be a real like divide in terms of like how they play and what they want to do.
So which one of the other 5 are you taking then?
I hate that I'm going to go Vitality. I feel like I actually really like the Flames move a lot.
Yeah. Even though people were very critical of removing dupreeh and all of his accomplishments and all that, people also seem to have ignored that in the early stages, even when before they had sort of adjusted Spinks into positions, they were swapping him between going first in, second in. They tried him lurking. Magisk's the one that was kind of filling in those roles where dupreeh was not. And I don't think they ever found a fit that like worked for him properly. But with Flames, it's very hard to find. He's a good young player and he's aggressive, and that's what they needed out of dupreeh that they never really got. We saw maybe a couple of games or a couple of events where it looked like it was working or it looked like it was serviceable, but he just didn't have that strike to him for this team. So I think Vitality have probably the best chance for me. Yeah, I also am just impressed by Flames because that OG team had like no calling. When towards the end of this run of this team, he was literally just entrying and they were just calling strats out of spawn, and it wasn't even that set up and he was still getting entries. So yeah, on Vitality, it should be even better.
The problem is, there's a bunch of angles I could go with here. Like, spoiler, I'm not taking G2. I'll take that straight off the table. Like, I just fundamentally don't believe in HooXi is the problem. So, like, if I'm actually going to call you to win the event, I've got to sort of believe your IGL can get through all the scenarios, all the matches, all the opponents. So I just don't on G2. It's why, in my opinion, they are the team they are. They're a team that goes quarterfinals or semis. That's about it. That's just what they do. And they didn't change any players. So I have no reason to be super hyped. The Cloud9 one is a mega sexy one on paper, but obviously the IGL thing there, I have no idea. Do they even keep Electronic eventually? Does he switch up to someone else IGL, and who knows? The Navi one, I'm not that deluded about Alexi. I'm not just going to call him straight out the gate, just win Cologne, like second, like real first land ever. Like, you know what? We'll see on that one. So as we go down, here's the problem. If I actually could choose, I want Heroic to win. I actually do think they play the best Counter-Strike. They do trade frag. So here's the thing. If you know me, I'm going to keep it on brand. Fuck it. FaZe Clan till the end, motherfucker. Till they break this lineup up, we're not doing it. Because here's the thing. Even though I know it's been ages since they won it, well, earlier this year, but we've had so many lands in CS, it feels like ages. I know they did blow like they probably should have been in that Dallas final, and they sort of lost it in OT. I know at the major, why didn't they do a bit better against? So every angle that goes against them, I get it, guys. But here's the problem. And I learned this years ago with the Fnatic team when they was truly great. Teams like that have that like insane clutch gene, dude, they can just steal tournaments. They can just have one where they're not even that good and they just get through a group stage. Then they play against someone they're supposed to lose. Like, you just hang on in map 2 and then you just bullshit map 3. Like, so the thing is, until I see them completely dead and buried, I can't give up on this team because I've just seen too many. Here's the thing: even when they lose, they never lose at the first available moment. There is always that impossible string of rounds they put together. There's always like they do get to a third map somehow when it's like fuck, they were getting blown out in the first map. Like this team essentially, it's like that's why I give the analogy to the Fnatic team of old. It's like they're the only one where it's like Superman, mate. It's like if you give them long enough, they're just going to save the day at the end. I don't know how, but they will. So if they do, it's a hell of a call. If they don't, luckily it's right in my wheelhouse. So then let's go. I was just biased, just likes FaZe, doesn't he? So I'll win either way on that one. And then here's the other thing. The reason why I don't do the heroic one, even though I do fundamentally think they're the best team in Counter-Strike, is because I had to learn my lesson the hard way with the starlust on this. Right? This is how media works, guys. People might remember, I do get the sick thing where I did call that like a starlust would win the Atlanta Major. Right? It looks so sick. That's not as sick if you know that me and Anders did call them to win loads of tournaments before that. And it's exactly the problem of what I would be doing if I picked heroic. What I really meant when I was picking them was, they're not the obvious one, but they could win the tournament. Like they have all the pieces, they have the right thing. But what I've had to learn with teams like that is, it's like Team Liquid. They go at their own pace. They really can just bomb like 5-6 finals in a row. Now they might get it together eventually and show you all the potential. But because it's not on your time schedule, it's on them figuring something out, them getting past the certain battling demons and overcoming challenges. That you can never know when that happens, unfortunately. Eventually it can happen. Maybe they kick in again, they become the best team and they win 5 tournaments. But right now, I'm going to go with a team that at least has won, can win, can even win from dodgy snap. I'm taking FaZe Clan all day long, baby. There you go. We all took different teams. That's good.
Yeah, surely one of us is bound to hit.
I mean, the joke now is that actually G2 just wins and then HooXi just goes, are you listening to me, all of people on Big Brains or whatever? And then we're just all wrecked at that point in time, innit? And then obviously Simple just does an interview like, I would just replace Thorin with Professor on Thorin's Big Brains, because that'd be how his interview would be, wouldn't it? Just a raw dog, isn't he? Just leave it at that. I've been pleasantly surprised during the time I've had my Patreon and my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, by both the financial support they've provided and the moral support. And so this video was kindly supported and made possible by Starlust, Theo Buenzli, Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Thooorin, Jensen Goh, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Bot Pounder 420, Yerka 86, Tosh, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in one of those AMAs where I tend to go pretty in depth? Sometimes they even spin out into their own videos. Do you want teasers to find out who the upcoming guests are for the myriad of interviews that I do across esports? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest? We have a channel on my Discord where you can do that if you're at the right tier. And of course, you could potentially take part in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me about whatever is on your mind in the scene. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.